The great hall, filled with the sweet scent of summer blossoms and the warm glow of countless candles, fell into a silence so deep and sudden it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. The cheerful music that had been dancing through the air died mid-note, the lute player's fingers frozen on the strings. Every eye, wide with shock and confusion, was fixed upon Elder Reno, the village chief, a man whose pride was as formidable and unyielding as the ancient mountains that guarded our secluded home. He stood like a stone statue of judgment between his radiant daughter, Lyra, her face veiled in delicate lace, and the quiet young man whose hand she clutched so tightly, the humble wanderer named Kai. The very air in the hall grew thick and heavy, becoming difficult to breathe. "I refuse this union." Reno's voice cut through the sacred stillness, cold and sharp as a shard of winter ice. "It shall bring nothing but ruin upon this house and upon this entire village." A collective, sharp gasp swept through the crowd of wedding guests, a wave of shock and dismay that rustled their fine clothes. Lyra, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, felt the solid ground beneath her feet seem to tilt and sway. Tears, hot and stinging, welled in her lovely eyes, blurring the vibrant colors of the festive hall into a watery painting of despair. She looked desperately at Kai, seeking some shared panic, but his calm, steady expression remained unchanged, a quiet anchor in the sudden, violent storm of her father's decree. He did not flinch or look away. He only held her trembling hand tighter, his grip a silent, unbreakable promise. This moment of public shame and heartbreak, you must understand, did not begin here, amidst the wedding finery and the scent of feast food. Its roots were planted deep in the past, nourished by secrets and sorrow, by the river that curled around our village like a sleeping, ancient serpent, holding its secrets in its watery heart. It began with a kind-hearted girl who loved the water's song more than any human melody, and a father whose stubborn pride ran deeper and darker than the river's deepest, most hidden pool. Our village was a small, vibrant jewel nestled securely in the emerald embrace of misty, green mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Life here was dictated entirely by the rhythm of the great river. It was our life-giver, providing clear water for our terraced fields, abundant silver fish for our tables, and a constant, soothing music for our souls. And sometimes, in its unpredictable fury, it became a life-taker, reminding us of our small place in the world. Lyra, the chief's only daughter and his greatest treasure, was a creature of pure, unassuming kindness. While her father ruled from his elevated, carved chair in the great house, issuing commands and settling disputes, she walked softly among the common people, her hands always busy. She could be found sitting with the gnarled old sailors, her fingers skillfully mending their torn fishing nets, or she would be in the dusty square, sharing her own warm bread with the hungry orphans who lingered at the village edge. But her true sanctuary, the place where her spirit felt truly free, was the riverbank, a place her father had explicitly and repeatedly forbidden her to visit. "The water is treacherous, daughter," he would warn, his eyes clouded with a shadow she could never quite decipher, a pain from a story he never told. "It has taken more from me than you could ever know. You will not go there." Yet Lyra felt an irresistible, magnetic pull, a siren's call from the flowing current that she could not ignore. Its gentle, constant murmur was a whisper on the wind, a soothing balm to her spirit that she found nowhere else. She would sneak away whenever she could, to sit on its cool, mossy banks, watching the iridescent dragonflies dance and skitter across the surface, feeling a profound peace there that her father's grand, orderly house could never provide. She was blissfully unaware that the river was indeed watching her in return, its ancient consciousness noting her every visit, and waiting, with the infinite patience of centuries, for the right moment to intervene in her destiny. One late afternoon, when the sun was a golden coin sinking behind the mountain peaks, the sky, which had been a clear, pale blue all day, suddenly turned the ominous color of bruised grapes and old wine. A distant, Low rumble of thunder echoed menacingly through the steep valley, a sound that seemed to vibrate in one's very bones. The river, usually a gentle, chuckling companion, began to swell, its surface churning ominously from a placid mirror into a roiling, angry beast. Lyra, lost in happy thought while collecting rare, blue river flowers that only bloomed in that one secret spot, found herself too far from home when the waters finally surged over the banks with a terrifying, explosive roar. The current was a cold, cruel monster, its icy fingers pulling her feet from under her and dragging her into its chaotic, suffocating heart. She fought with all her strength, gasping for precious air, her terrified cries for help swallowed by the water's deafening, all-consuming fury. Just as her strength failed completely and a welcoming darkness began to nibble at the edges of her vision, a strong, sure arm, solid as an oak branch, wrapped firmly around her waist. A young man, a stranger with eyes the color of a summer sky, pulled her from the churning, greedy water, carrying her effortlessly through the current to the safety of the high, grassy bank. "You are safe now," he murmured, his voice remarkably calm and steady amidst the storm's continuing chaos. Lyra shivered violently, soaked to the skin, but not from the cold alone. She trembled from the strange, radiating warmth of his touch, a heat that seemed to emanate from within him. For a man who had just been submerged in the icy, storm-swollen water, his skin was oddly, comfortingly warm, like a stone that had been baked all day by the summer sun, holding its heat against the coming chill of evening. The stranger's name, he said, was Kai. It was a short, simple name, like a pebble smoothed by the water, and it was all he offered. He had no family name to honor, no history in any of the neighboring villages that anyone could recall, and no wealth to speak of beyond the simple, well-worn clothes on his back. He was a wanderer, he explained softly to the curious villagers, who had simply arrived with the last turn of the season, appearing as quietly as the morning mist. The villagers, naturally cautious of outsiders who came with no references or kin, watched him with wary eyes at first, their conversations about him hushed and speculative. But Kai's gentle, helpful nature soon began to melt their reservations like spring sun on winter frost. He worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk to repair the damage from the flood, his lean, wiry frame belying a surprising, innate strength as he helped lift heavy logs and move stones. He spoke to the restless river in a low, humming tone, a sound that seemed to resonate with the water itself, calming skittish horses that neared its banks when no one else could approach them. Lyra watched him from a distance, her initial gratitude for her rescue blossoming slowly into a deep, curious fascination that occupied her thoughts day and night. When she gently asked him where his home had been before, where his people were, his warm, open smile would become tinged with a profound, unshakable sadness that made her heart ache. "The water brought me here," was all he would ever say, his gaze inevitably drifting towards the flowing, endless current. He was a mystery, a locked box with no visible key, and Lyra felt her heart becoming increasingly, dangerously entangled with the enigma of him, longing with every beat to understand the deep sorrow that lived behind his kind eyes. Elder Reno, hearing the growing whispers about his daughter and the intriguing newcomer, finally summoned Kai to the austere grandeur of the great house. He looked the young man up and down from his raised chair, his expression as cold and unyielding as the granite of the mountains. "You have no land, no lineage, no name of honor to bring to this family," Reno stated, his voice dripping with a disdain that chilled the air in the room. "You are nothing but a rootless wanderer, a leaf blown on the wind. You will stay away from my daughter." Lyra, who had been listening anxiously at the heavy oak door, could bear it no longer and rushed in, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of anger and deep embarrassment. "Father, please," she began, but her father's voice was final, a king's decree not to be challenged by mere emotion. "A man who hides his roots will one day bury yours, Lyra. He is not for you. He offers you nothing but a life of uncertainty and want." Later, when the shadows were long, He confronted Kai alone in the courtyard, his tone low and threatening, meant for the young man's ears only. Leave this village. Disappear as you came. She is destined for a chief's son, a man of substance, not for a man who appears from the mist like a ghost with nothing to his name. Kai, to Reno's great surprise, merely bowed his head respectfully, his eyes holding a deep, ancient knowing that the elder chief could not fathom, a wisdom that seemed far too old for his young face. But he did not leave. His love for Lyra was a seed that had already taken root deep within him, and it was now defiantly pushing through the hard, stony ground of her father's immense and towering pride, determined to reach the sun. Forbidden from meeting openly, Lyra and Kai's love became a secret treasure, a precious hoard of moments carefully collected and cherished. They met only at the magical hour of twilight, by a hidden, serene bend in the river that was shielded by a curtain of weeping willows, a place where the fireflies danced like scattered fragments of starlight come to earth. It was there, under the soft lavender sky, with the first evening stars beginning to blink awake, that he took a piece of smooth, river-worn stone, gray and flecked with silver, and began to carve it with a sharp, small knife. His hands moved with a skilled, loving patience, and soon he presented her with a small, perfect pendant shaped like a single, falling water droplet, strung on a simple, strong leather cord. "This is for you," he said, his voice as soft as the evening breeze that rustled the leaves. "When you wear this, the river will always know you. It will always remember you, and it will always protect you, no matter where you are." As he fastened around her neck, his fingers briefly brushing the skin of her nape, Lyra felt a strange, gentle warmth spread from the stone and bloom through her chest, a feeling of profound safety and connection that settled deep in her soul. It felt like a sacred vow, more binding than any ceremony. In that hidden, magical place, with the river singing its eternal song beside them, their love grew, a beautiful, fragile blossom thriving in the protective shadows, away from the harsh, withering light of her father's disapproval. That night, exhausted from emotion and the thrill of her secret meeting, Lyra fell into a deep and strangely troubled sleep. She dreamed not a normal dream, but a vivid, waking vision. She stood on the bank and saw a terrifying, beautiful golden storm raging over the river, the water rising in great, shimmering, liquid walls that touched the bruised purple sky. From the shimmering, turbulent depths, a voice echoed, not in anger or threat, but in deep, resonant sorrow that vibrated in her very bones. "Love can heal what pride has broken," it whispered through the fabric of the dream. She saw Kai then, standing at the river's edge, his form glowing with a soft, unearthly blue light, his feet seemingly rooted to the water itself. Then the vision shifted, swirled, and she saw her father, much younger, his face she barely recognized, twisted in a blind, unforgiving rage she had never witnessed in her life. He was shouting, his mouth a cruel slash, and he was throwing a small, precious bundle into the raging, flooded water, a bundle that cried out. Lyra awoke with a sharp gasp, sitting bolt upright in her bed, her heart hammering against her ribs, her cheeks wet with tears she did not remember shedding. The dream felt more real, more solid, than the silvery moonlight now streaming through her window. The droplet pendant on her chest, resting over her heart, pulsed with a faint, residual warmth, as if it still held the echo of the river's haunting, prophetic voice, a voice that had spoken a truth she was not yet ready to understand. As the great harvest moon rose, a perfect, luminous pearl in the vast, indigo sky, painting the world in shades of silver and mystery, Kai did the unthinkable. He walked with quiet determination into the very heart of the village square, where families gathered to enjoy the cool evening air, and before all the assembled people, he publicly, formally asked Elder Reno for Lyra's hand in marriage. A murmur of approval and hopeful excitement ran through the crowd. They had all seen his quiet strength, his unwavering goodness, the way he helped anyone in need without being asked. They believed in their simple, honest way that he was a good man. But Reno's face, illuminated by the moon, darkened like a thunderhead gathering before storm. He looked from Kai's hopeful, earnest face to his daughter's pleading, love-filled eyes, and let out a short, bitter, cold laugh that silenced the square and froze the hope in Lyra's heart. "You," he scoffed, his voice dripping with a contempt that made several people flinch. "A nameless man, a shadow, a whisper, cannot guard my daughter's honor or her future. You offer her nothing but a life of wandering and uncertainty, of sleeping under strange stars." My answer was no, and it will always be no. The fragile, beautiful hope that had blossomed in Lyra's eyes shattered like fine glass dropped on stone, scattering into 1,000 piercing, painful pieces that she felt in her very soul. Heartbroken, but with a spirit that refused to be completely broken, Lyra went to the village healer, an old, bent woman who lived in a cottage nestled in a hollow where the river reeds grew thick and tall, whispering secrets to one another. The healer's eyes were the color of the river's deepest, most mysterious pools, and they had seen many generations come and go, their joys and their sorrows. She took Lyra's soft, young hands in her own gnarled, age-spotted ones, her touch cool and strangely calming. She felt the droplet pendant, her thumbs stroking its smooth surface, and a knowing, ancient look crossed her wrinkled, wise face. "I bless you, child," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves in the wind. "And I bless your Kai. Do not lose heart. The river remembers every kindness ever offered to it, and it never, ever forgets a cruelty. It remembers every face that has ever looked upon its waters, in love or in anger." Her words were a cryptic puzzle, a riddle wrapped in mystery, but they filled Lyra's heavy heart with a strange, defiant courage that straightened her shoulders. It was a secret blessing, a single, steady candle flame glowing with determination in the overwhelming darkness her father had tried to impose upon her future, a small light to guide her way forward. Elder Reno's pride, publicly challenged and deeply wounded, festered and curdled into a cold, hard rage that burned in his gut day and night. He summoned Lyra before him in the vast, echoing great hall, his expression grim and unyielding as carved stone. "If you defy me and marry that stranger," he swore, his finger pointing at her like a dagger aimed at her heart, "you are no longer a daughter of mine. I will disown you, strike your name from our family line as if you were never born. And I will curse your love so that it withers and dies like a blighted vine, bearing no fruit, offering no shade." His words were so venomous, so full of malice, that they seemed to poison the very air in the room, making it hard to breathe. Outside, as if in direct response to his oath, the wind began to howl around the corners of the house, and the river, calm and placid just moments before, slapped and churned angrily against its banks, its water turning a muddy, troubled brown. It was as if his towering, unyielding pride had finally stirred something ancient and powerful, something that had been sleeping fitfully beneath the gentle, placid surface of the water, waiting for this very reason, this specific act of human bitterness, to awaken fully. The next morning, the villagers awoke to an ominous and utterly unnatural sight. Dark, heavy clouds, thick as carded wool, gathered in a menacing, swirling not directly over the precise path of the river, though the rest of the sky was a clear, cheerful, untroubled blue. The water itself flowed in an uneasy, murky brown, its surface choppy and disturbed as if by a subterranean agitation. The animals sensitive to such shifts sensed it first. Birds fled in chattering, anxious flocks from the trees along the bank, and dogs whined and cowered, hiding under porches and in dark corners of homes, their tails between their legs. The old fishermen, men who had spent their lives reading the water's moods, gathered by the shore, their faces etched with grim worry, their voices low. "The River King is restless," one of the eldest muttered, making a swift, ancient sign against evil with his gnarled, weathered fingers. They remembered the old stories, half-forgotten tales told on winter nights, of a powerful, temperamental spirit who commanded the waters and demanded respect. A familiar, ancestral fear, dormant for many peaceful, prosperous years, began to stir in their hearts, cold and unwelcome. A clear omen was upon them. Its name was dread, a feeling that settled over the village like a fine, cold mist. Lyra knew in her soul, with a certainty that went beyond thought, that she could not live a life dictated solely by her father's pride. A hollow, gray existence without Kai's love to color it. Under the watchful, judging eye of the next full moon, a perfect, luminous orb in the star-dusted sky, they made the fateful, final decision to elope. They packed little, only a few essentials, their hearts a heavy, conflicting mixture of resolute determination and profound sorrow for the home and the father she was leaving behind. As they crossed the creaking, old wooden bridge that led away from the village and into the shadowy unknown of the forest beyond, Lyra, her hand in Kai's, glanced down at the water below. Her breath caught in her throat, and she stopped, pulling Kai to a halt beside her. The river was glowing. It was emitting a faint, ethereal, golden light from its depths, illuminating the dark, treacherous path before them like a celestial guide sent from the heavens. It was not a warning, she felt with every fiber of her being, but a silent, powerful acknowledgement of their choice. They were stepping onto a path written not by her father's will, nor by village tradition, but by a deeper, older destiny, one the river itself had penned long ago on the scrolls of time. When Elder Reno discovered Lyra's room empty and her small trunk of treasures gone, his rage was a physical, terrifying force that seemed to shake the very foundations of the great house. She has chosen him. The river has stolen from me again, he roared to his terrified advisors, his face purple with fury, believing Kai had taken his daughter as payment for some old, imagined debt from a past he refused to honestly confront. Blinded by this fury and a crushing sense of betrayal, he gathered a group of his strongest, most loyal men, arming them with staves and grim expressions. "We ride now. Saddle the horses. Find them. Bring my daughter back to me." He led them out, a furious chief marching headlong toward a personal reckoning he could not begin to foresee, his pride a blazing torch leading him into the darkness. He was so consumed by the inferno of his own anger and wounded authority that he was utterly blind to the true, colossal storm that was gathering, both in the heavens above and within the deepest, most hidden chambers of his own hardened heart. As Reno and his men reached the old, vulnerable bridge, the very spot where Lyra had seen the golden light, the sky simply exploded. Rain fell not in drops, but in solid, punishing sheets that stung the skin and blinded the eyes, and the river swelled instantly into a raging, monstrous beast of churning brown water and splintered debris torn from the forest. The wooden bridge groaned and splintered, its planks tearing apart like dry twigs in a giant's hand. Men were swept away from their saddles, their terrified cries for help swallowed by the water's deafening, all-consuming roar. Reno, thrown from his panicked, rearing horse, clung desperately to a jagged, slippery rock, the furious current pulling relentlessly at his legs, threatening to drag him into the abyss and a watery grave. He knew, with a cold, clear, terrifying certainty, that he was about to die here, alone and unmourned. Then, through the stinging spray and the chaotic, swirling darkness, he saw a figure dive fearlessly, gracefully, into the furious, deadly current. It was Kai, swimming with an impossible, powerful grace against the mighty, crushing force of the flood, risking his own life without a second thought to save the very man who had cursed him and wished him gone from the world. Elder Reno awoke on the muddy, litter-strewn riverbank, coughing and choking up bitter river water, his body aching in every limb. Kai knelt beside him, breathing heavily, his own clothes soaked and torn, his hair plastered to his forehead. The storm, as quickly and violently as it had come, was already calming to a mere, soft drizzle, the clouds breaking apart. As Reno shakily, weakly, sat up, his hand went to his chest, and felt something unfamiliar and smooth around his neck. It was Lyra's carved droplet pendant, the one he had seen her wear. Kamasa placed it there during the desperate rescue. It protected you, Kai said simply, his voice tired but firm, his gaze steady and clear. Holding the smooth, strangely warm stone in his palm, feeling its gentle heat seep into his skin, Reno was suddenly, overwhelmingly flooded with a shame so profound and piercing it stole his breath away and brought fresh, hot tears to his eyes. This stranger, this nobody he had despised and driven away, had selflessly, courageously saved the life of the man who had openly wished him gone from the earth. For the very first time, the high, impregnable walls of his pride showed a deep, structural crack, and through that crack, a single, blinding sliver of light and painful, humbling doubt flooded in, illuminating the darkness of his own soul. A somber, heavy quiet fell over the village in the days that followed, a pall of reflection and unease. Humbled by his near-death experience and Kai's breathtakingly selfless act, Elder Reno, with great and obvious reluctance, gave his cold, joyless, formal blessing. The wedding would proceed. There was no fatherly warmth in his eyes as he announced it, no smile on his lips, only a weary, defeated acceptance, as if he were agreeing to a bitter medicine. The ceremony was hastily rearranged in the same great hall where the first, brutal refusal had occurred only weeks before. Guests spoke in hushed, apprehensive tones, the memory of the violent flood and the public shaming hanging over the festive preparations like a heavy, gray shroud. As Lyra and Kai stood facing each other before the village elder, ready to speak the vows that would join their lives forever, the sky outside was a heavy, oppressive gray blanket, holding its breath. The air in the hall was thick and still, saturated with the scent of unshed rain and the palpable, suffocating weight of unspoken, collective fear about what this marriage might truly unleash. The wedding vows began. Lyra, looking more beautiful and serene than anyone had ever seen her, her face a picture of pure love, gazed into Kai's deep eyes, seeing only boundless devotion and a flicker of that deep, ancient sorrow that she now understood was an inseparable part of him. As she spoke her promise to love and honor him all the days of her life, her voice clear and steady, a low, guttural roll of thunder echoed, not from the clouds above the hall, but seemingly from the very earth beneath their feet, a deep vibration that came from the direction of the river itself. The droplet pendant at her chest, resting over her heart, suddenly flared with a brilliant, blinding golden light that illuminated her entire face and made the guests cry out and shield their eyes. The very ground trembled, causing the wedding cups to rattle on the tables and a fine dust to sift down from the rafters. Outside, the villagers who had not fit in the hall cried out in pure, unadulterated terror as the river roared, its waters churning and flowing violently, impossibly backward, defying all known nature and logic. A thick, spectral mist, cold and smelling of deep water and old stone, rose from its surface, and within the swirling, living vapor, forms of water and shimmering, blue-white light began to take shape, flowing into the hall like a tide and surrounding the stunned, terrified wedding party. The mist and light coalesced, swirling upward from the floor, twisting and growing into a colossal, majestic figure of living, swirling water and shimmering spirit, the River King himself. He filled the high ceiling of the hall, his form constantly moving, flowing, his presence emanating an age-old power. His voice was the sound of 1,000 waterfalls crashing together in a deep canyon, shaking the hall to its very foundations, vibrating in the bones of every person present. He pointed a liquid, powerful, accusing finger at Elder Reno, who had collapsed to his knees, his face a mask of pure, petrified terror. "Elder Reno," the voice boomed, echoing in the soul of every man, woman, and child. "Look upon me. Do you remember the child? The innocent child you cast into my waters in a fit of prideful, selfish rage? The child you believe drowned for the crime of stealing a few mere coins from your vast, overflowing storehouse. The long-buried memory, ugly and raw and shameful, surged into Reno's mind with the force of a physical blow, and his face crumpled, his body folding in on itself under the weight of pure, unadulterated horror and guilt. The devastating, horrifying truth crashed down upon everyone in the hall, a wave of understanding that left them stunned and reeling. Years ago, a young servant boy, a quiet, shy orphan with no one to defend him, had been hastily accused of stealing a handful of silver coins from Reno's plentiful, heavily guarded storehouse. In his pride and unchecked, volatile anger, Reno had dragged the terrified, sobbing boy to the edge of the flooded river and, with his own hands, thrown him into the raging current, believing the violent, cold water would deliver his harsh, final justice. He had returned to the village alone and coldly told everyone the boy had simply run away, a thief in the night. But the River King had seen. He had witnessed the act of cruelty from his watery realm. He had saved the child, pulling him from the current and taking him into his deep, mysterious realm, raising him as his own beloved son. The curse placed on Kai, then, was not one of punishment or suffering, but one of ultimate redemption. He was to walk as a mortal, unknown and unclaimed, until his own human heart was pure and strong enough to forgive the very man who had wronged him, the man who was, by fate's cruel and ironic twist, his beloved Lyra's own father. All eyes in the hall, wide with fear and awe, turned from the towering River King to Kai. His form began to shimmer, to become translucent and beautiful, like clear, flowing water held up to the sun. His eyes glowed with a soft, radiant, unearthly blue light that held the depth and mystery of the entire ocean. "I was that child," Kai said, his voice echoing with a dual resonance, both warmly, humanly mortal, and awesomely, terrifyingly divine. "I did not die that day. I was saved from the dark, cold depths and raised in the river's loving, powerful heart. My father's condition for my return was not a curse of suffering, but a test of spirit. I could only return to my true home when my own heart was pure enough, was strong enough to forgive the blood that had wronged me, to show mercy to the man who showed me none." He looked at the prostrate, weeping Reno, not with hatred or desire for vengeance, but with a profound, aching pity that was far more powerful and devastating than any anger could ever be. The gasps in the hall were now not of fear, but of utter, stunned awe and a terrible, heartbreaking understanding of the immense sacrifice and love that had been living among them all this time. Elder Reno collapsed fully to the cold, hard stone floor, his body racked with great, heaving, ugly sobs that seemed to tear from his very core. "Forgive me. I was a proud fool, a blind, arrogant monster," he cried out, his voice broken and ragged, his hands clawing at the stone as if to find a hiding place. The villagers looked away from their chief, their years of respect and deference turning to cold ash in their mouths. They saw now, with horrifying clarity, how his hidden, violent sin had festered and brought a curse upon them all, how his unyielding pride had almost cost them the river's bounty and their very lives in the floods. The very foundation of Reno's life, built so carefully and proudly upon his status, his authority, and his reputation, crumbled to dust around him in that single, exposed moment, leaving him utterly naked, small, and consumed by a bottomless, shaming shame before the very people he had spent a lifetime leading and commanding. The River King's powerful, watery voice softened to a deep, resonant murmur that nonetheless filled every corner of the silent, transfixed hall. "The curse is broken. The test is passed. Kai, my beloved son, you may now return to your true home in the river, to your immortal birthright forever." Then he turned his luminous, penetrating gaze to the sobbing, broken form of Reno on the floor. "But if he chooses to stay, to live out a single, fleeting mortal life with his mortal bride, the price is his own mortal existence. He will fade with the first light of the morning sun, his spirit dissolving into the air." It was an impossible, cruel choice, a torment of the heart. eternal life without his one true love, or a single glorious day of happiness with her, ending in his complete and utter dissolution from the world, lost to her forever. The hall waited, utterly breathless, every soul suspended in the silence, for the words that would seal Kai's destiny and define their future. Before Kai could even open his mouth to speak his impossible choice, the river outside surged again in one final, violent, vengeful wave, crashing through the open sides of the hall with explosive force and sweeping the prostrate, broken Reno off his feet and toward a deadly, churning whirlpool of splintered wood and sharp rock. Without a single moment's hesitation, his decision made not with words but with action, Kai moved. He lunged forward, his body now almost entirely composed of brilliant, shimmering light and swirling, living water, and with a final, mighty, selfless effort, he pulled Reno back from the brink of death to safety once more. As he did, he looked directly into the old man's terrified, grateful, weeping eyes. "I forgive you," Kai whispered, his voice clear and sure, carrying like a bell to every corner of the hall, a sound of pure, untainted grace. This forgiveness frees us both. It ends the cycle. As the final, beautiful word left his lips, his body could hold its form no longer and dissolved completely into a magnificent, silent shower of brilliant, shimmering blue and gold light that swirled upward like a reverse waterfall of stars before streaming out of the hall and flowing back, like a sigh of relief, into the waiting, now calm river from whence he came. The storm ceased instantly, completely, as if a great, silent blanket had been thrown over it. The howling wind died, the mist vanished into nothingness, and the rain stopped. The river returned peacefully, immediately, to its bed, flowing clearer, bluer, and more serenely than anyone in the village had ever seen in their entire lives, its surface like polished blue glass. In its calm, mirror-like surface, Lyra, standing alone at the water's edge, her white wedding gown stark against the green bank, saw a fleeting, beautiful reflection, Kai's smiling, loving, beautiful face, looking back at her one last time with all the love in the world shining in his blue eyes, before it gently faded, melting into the sunlight, now dancing on the water's shimmering surface. A single, glowing tear, filled with all her love and loss, fell from Lyra's eye and dropped into the river, a final, precious gift to the waters that held her heart. Elder Reno remained on his knees by the bank, his body trembling with a storm of grief for the son he had lost twice, first through his own cruelty and now through his sacrifice, and with a profound, aching, humbling gratitude for the unconditional, miraculous forgiveness he had been so graciously, undeservedly granted. Years passed. The village prospered as never before, the fields always green and abundant, the fishing nets always full, and the river never once flooded again, its waters always placid, generous, and gentle. Elder Reno became a humbler, quieter, and infinitely wiser leader, his every decision tempered by the searing memory of his failure and Kai's ultimate sacrifice, his pride now a lesson, not a weapon. Lyra never married another. She became the village's wise woman, a guardian of the river's lore, and she would often walk by its banks, feeling Kai's loving presence in every ripple and eddy, in every sunbeam that danced on its surface. The droplet pendant was no longer around her neck. It now rested at the very bottom of the deepest, stillest pool, a permanent, glowing ward, eternally guarding the village and its people from harm. We villagers tell our children the tale of Lyra and the River King's son when the nights grow long. We say to them, "Remember, my dears, that pride builds high, cold walls around the heart, but love, true love, is like the river. It is relentless, patient, and powerful, and it flows through every crack, washing even the hardest, oldest pride into soft, fertile dust, and it remembers every single kindness forever." And if you walk by the river at twilight, when the light is just right and the world is hushed, you can sometimes see a faint, golden glow emanating from the depths, a permanent, beautiful reminder that true love and true forgiveness have the eternal power to redeem, to heal, and to save even the hardest, most prideful heart, making it new again.